All right, fiddle players, this is Fiddlin' Mike here again for another fiddlin' lesson. Last time we did Angeline the Baker, an old fiddle standard. This time we're going to do another fiddle standard called Soldier's Joy. This is probably the first tune any fiddle player ever learns, and it's one of the super classics. And I'm really excited about this arrangement I'm going to teach you because even though this is considered a beginner's tune, I stuffed this arrangement full of super useful and fiddly information. I put in the original antique version of the tune. The Soldier's Joy is actually based on an older tune from England called The King's Head, which basically is just a simpler version of Soldier's Joy. So the first phrase has the King's Head, and then I spice it up, bring it back to the regular Soldier's Joy, and then I put in some variations. I got all kinds of great improv information in there for you. I stuffed it full of great stuff. So enjoy Soldier's Joy. Alright guys, so that was Soldier's Joy, fast and slow. I hope it was slow enough for you. I hope you caught all the notes, but I'm going to go over some tricky spots and some of the cool licks and draw your attention to the information that you really want to know and show you how to work it into other tunes. So that first phrase, as I mentioned in the beginning, is the older version of Soldier's Joy, and Soldier's Joy used to be called the King's Head. And that was way back in old England, where a lot of our fiddle tunes come from. And it's almost like a skeleton of Soldier's Joy. Most people know Soldier's Joy as like this. And the original version, the King's Head, is just a simpler version of that. It's like a halftime. So I put that in there for your information. It's really always really important to know how a tune actually goes. I mean, I find that a lot of bluegrass pickers, they learn the Tony Rice version of a tune first, and they don't know how the melody of a tune actually goes. When they learn Blackberry Blossom, they learn the Tony Rice version, but they don't actually know how the melody goes from the original guy who wrote it. And so that's really important knowledge to have. If you want to jam on a tune, you should know what the bass is and then build on that. So I put that in there in the first measure, and then the first two bars actually, and then the second two bars. The next time we go through that phrase, I brought it back to the regular Soldier's Joy. And then the third time we go through that phrase, I transcribed for fiddle. I made it for fiddle like the Tony Rice version of Soldier's Joy. If you've ever heard Tony Rice pick on the Soldier's Joy, it sounds like a lot like what I wrote for the fiddle part here. And it's just a lot of eighth notes, which I mentioned before, bluegrass players love to do. And it's just good to be able to take a melody and make your fiddle line sort of dance around that melody a little bit. So instead of we do so instead of that basic melody, we do this. And so you'll notice that variation, what is it about that variation that still sounds like the Soldier's Joy? There's different notes. So how different can you get before you're not close enough to the tune? And one of the things I want to call your attention to, I went to a workshop once with Mark O'Connor. He's, as you probably know, basically the greatest fiddle player on earth. At least he's the most famous. And he said that when he improvised, he often thought of tunes in terms of start and end points. If a melody started down low and then the line would end up high, he would try and make his melody also follow that sort of cadence. Or, if he's being creative, he would flip it, and he would play the melody notes up high, make them go down low, and the contrast would be an interesting sort of sense of tension that would sound cool. So, keeping that in mind, we have the melody line which goes, it ends on that high part. Da, ba, ba. Now, the variation, we're going to start on the same note, the A, as the melody, and go. So we're kind of going down a little bit, like ba 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 ba. That's the way the melody line goes. Our variation is a similar thing. Ba 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 da, da, da. So we go down a little bit and then come up high. So even though we're playing a lot of different notes, we're following that line. So that's the way that variation works. Also, when we're doing a lot of those eighth notes, I threw in the three-note slur phrasing that I talked about in Angeline the Baker. Very, very common fiddle bowing technique. And it's a good way of evening out your bow.